PK, we have been on a brief hiatus, I suppose.
We have been.
That's mostly my fault, so I
Oh,
apologize.
it's mine too. Apologize. What?
Apologize, yes. So,
Well, I apologize over the sound of me eating goldfish. I don't know if you can hear that.
that's acceptable. That's just part of what we do here. I think we need
It's my
nourishment.
lunch.
Just the
That's
lunch of champions, just gnawing on goldfish for his
It's got-
entire meal.
It's got salt. It's got all that orange coloring. It's gotta be great. Gotta be good for you.
It's fish. It must have protein in it, right?
Right. Your
Yeah.
fish is really good for you.
Yeah, I've been told. Lots of people say so. Um, but so we are on a little hiatus because I was moving around a little bit and just I don't know. We just didn't take the time to get hooked up, but that's all good. We are now returned here together, and yeah, we're talking today about Minority Report.
Yeah. So a little backstory. It's kind of funny. Paul had whatever, had suggested to me earlier in the week, like, hey, want to do Minority Report for the podcast, and I had never heard of this movie before. So I was like, oh, like a minor report, like a small podcast. He must be busy. I'm like, sure, that sounds good. Sounds great. And then I was like, what do you want to do? And he was like, Minority Report. And I was like, what? Then I learned it was a movie. True story. True story, guys.
Yeah, like you're like, what do you want to? Yeah, I thought it was funny. It's like, you want to do Minority Report, and you're like, sure. What do you want to do? And I'm like, excuse me, the thing I just said. But yeah, I mean, I'm surprised you've never heard of this one before. Honestly, like I can understand like not having seen it because I feel like it's not like a lot of people I know have never seen this movie. But like, this is it's Steven Spielberg, it's Tom Cruise, so I guess I don't know. It's just a little surprising you never heard of it. Not saying it's bad. I just was amused that it had never come up before.
On me, I repent in dust and sackcloth.
Yeah, good.
I'm beating my chest.
That was necessary. Yes.
I thought I was a really good movie. I wasn't
Yeah.
expecting it to be that good. So
Yeah, I really love this movie. That's part of why I picked it out as like, let's do this.
Oh, you picked it out because you like it. Oh,
I know. It's a shame on me. Like, I don't know. I wanted to watch something good, and like, there's some good parts of this movie. I'm not saying the whole movie is like a masterpiece, but it's definitely like I really like it. Like, I think it's a very cool movie, and it has a lot of cool concepts, and it's very well made. I mean, it's Steven Spielberg. Like, he doesn't make that many bad movies. So
no, I'm always like, I'm surprised at how many movies Spielberg has actually made. Like, you think Spielberg, and you're like, oh, like Jurassic Park and
Indiana Jones.
Indiana Jones, and like there's all these other movies in addition to those. Like everyone knows him for those main movies.
Yeah, the man just makes a lot of movies, much like Tom Cruise.
Yes. Like, oh, it's a Tom Cruise movie. Oh, okay.
In this case, we have it's a science fiction movie, first of all, which is cool because I feel like, particularly Spielberg, I don't think he's done much sci-fi. So this is sort of like, at least as far as I can picture in my head right now, like the biggest sort of sci-fi movie Spielberg's done. You could, because like Jurassic Park, you could claim is sci-fi, but it's like set in the present, so it's like sci-fi present. I don't know how to like describe that.
Yeah,
exactly.
that is a weird.
Um,
You've heard of historical fiction. Now we have present fiction.
yes, contemporary science.
Contemporary fiction. Yeah.
Um,
Dino fiction.
Minority Report, for anyone who like doesn't know and is for some reason interested in hearing us talk about it, is like a near future sci-fi movie, and it stars Tom Cruise, directed by Spielberg, in which Tom Cruise is a detective in the DC area, that is Washington DC, the capital of the United States of America.
Which I guess that's significant because what movie takes place in DC?
I mean, there are others, but yeah, I feel like it is kind of fun because it's like there are so many movies that are like, yeah, it's New York and or here's LA or whatever, but like, yeah, I feel like DC is actually relatively neglected for some reason. I don't fully know why. I don't know if it's maybe because it's like probably more complicated to film in DC, I would assume, as opposed to I feel like a lot of this movie probably isn't actually filmed in DC. So I don't know. So Tom Cruise
Anyways,
is a detective, but unlike most detectives, that like a crime happens and they have to go to the crime scene and they try and figure out like what is the crime or like how was the crime done, who did it. Tom Cruise gets to stop crimes before they even happen. Dun dun dun.
he's that cool.
Yeah.
This is before he was in the Mission Impossible team. So he
Yes.
started out pre-crime, then he just moved to post-crime. It was more of his thing, really.
More of his style.
Yeah.
But
And this takes place in 2054 or something.
yes, I believe you're right. 2054.
How did you feel about their portrayal of like the future? So this was made in 2003 or something?
I think the movie comes out in 2002.
2002. Okay.
June 17th, 2002. That's the release date. I've got it here.
Okay.
Um, and I mean, you're shooting at that point 52 years in the future, so it's like, okay, a lot can happen in 52 years. I was trying to think about it in terms of like, okay, 2002 to like, it would be 1950. It would be 50 years, 52 years before that. Like a lot changed. I mean, like some of the stuff does feel a little dramatic, but like some of the stuff is also like relatively good. Like I like the apartment, like his apartment. I like his I like the holographic stuff. How
Yes,
it's
I
not
like that a lot.
great. Like I guess to put it that way, like it looks. And by not great, I mean like in the movie it's great, but like it's not like magic. It's not like you don't see like an actual hologram like that just looks like a regular person like standing in the room. It's like it's almost like it's a screen. Like it's almost like it's still a flat image, but it's like coming out of the background towards you.
It's
Like
just like a glass background, right? And they just project things on the glass, is what it looked like. It was.
yeah, almost. But then like the images can also like come out of the screen a little bit and like get sort of warped
Oh, yes.
around
Yeah.
and stuff.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is interesting. So it's like it's not bad in that sense. Like it's a cool technology, but and I feel like it feels a little more real, and it feels like it's because there's like imperfections in it, like in the universe, it makes it feel a little more grounded versus just like we have magic holograms and we can just like have like it
Yeah.
for all it would appear like an actual person just like standing in the room talking to Tom Cruise. Like no, it's not that good. So I like that it has like its limitations to it.
Right. I felt like the most unrealistic part of the future society was honestly the highways.
The highways are pretty funny.
Because that was very, I mean, maybe if it's kind of practical, but that's super expensive. It's like you got cars on like, the cars are, they're futuristic and it looks like they're on some kind of like automated, like they're not actually driving. They're just being brought one place to another.
They're all like
And
self-driving cars, which I mean that's cool, but like yeah, they're custom. Like also it's funny because this world apparently has like two different sets of cars.
Yes.
Because like if you think about it, you've got like the future crazy cars. I mean they're all like futuristic, but like you've got like the cars that are like the self-driving cars that they like go sideways and they can like go up these like vertical interstates and
That's the thing. The interstates are like horizontal, like vertical. Like the highway system we already have is like probably too expensive, honestly, for the economy to afford. But
like they have to like completely overhaul it again, I guess, to build this like massive crazy interstate system that like
yeah,
has all these custom vehicles that would totally make all of like existing cars obsolete. Like there would have to be a hard change at some point where it's like, okay, like you can't use old cars on the road anymore because
they did mention Lexus. Like one of the vehicles had like a Lexus
Yes.
logo on it. So I was like, okay,
product
I guess
placement.
Lexus guys in the 2054. Lexus is the company that buys out all the other car companies.
Yeah, it's actually like a mega
all American
monopoly.
vehicles.
One car company comes up with the idea for these like self-driving car pods, and then they like have so much money that they like can fund the construction of the road product, and then everyone can only buy their cars because none of the other cars work on the new road. It's like,
And then
well,
somehow-
sorry guys.
Yeah, and somehow all the Americans decide to give up their trucks and sports vehicles.
Yeah, the only way I can look at it is maybe this is like in the city. This is basically some sort of almost mass transit system because the thing
Yeah.
is we still see more regular cars because there's like a scene where Tom Cruise is running and like the FBI guys pull up and like it's a future looking car but it's like someone's still driving it and it's clearly not compatible, or at least it doesn't seem like it would be compatible with like the crazy interstate like multi-lane verticality rails. So like that,
No.
and then also Tom Cruise is driving like a different car at one point to go out into the countryside.
Yep.
And that car also doesn't seem like it would work on the interstate system thingy. So I think maybe this is some sort of like mass transit system that like when you're in the city, like that this is the way you get around, is everyone has
Yeah.
their own little pod that's like, you know, powered by, maybe it's even like an electric train system where like the road's powering the car or something. And
Which
like,
makes most sense if it was like a metropolis kind of, or metropolitan, like large city phenomenon. This kind of highway.
yeah. So it's a cool, it's like a cool thing. I feel like it doesn't actually get used all that much. Like it's used for like one sort of action scene where Tom Cruise is like jumping from
Yeah.
car to car, and also I guess just to show like the level of control in the future, because like Tom Cruise is like at one point running and he's like riding in his little pod, and like they just take it over, you know, remotely, like they can just do that.
Yeah.
The government does. And so like, you know, it's like I feel like that's another big thing in this movie, is just like showing like just the reach of this like future law enforcement and how it seems like there are no limits on it. And there's a lot of discussion that goes into that. This is basically the premises. There's these precogs. There's these people that can see the future. Specifically, they see murder in
And
the
there's 3 of
future.
them.
There's 3 of them, and they're all wired up in the police HQ. And so, like, before a murder happens, they'll get like flashes of like the murder scene, and so they're like, you'll see like, okay, you know, there's this, there's that. What's funny is the actual like projections that they see, like from coming from their minds, they're like I said, they're just like flashes. So you'll see like, okay, there's a man walking into a room, or okay, he's holding scissors or whatever.
Yeah, you know, I wonder how they filmed that, because that was actually a pretty, I feel like, I don't know, a pretty creative way to represent like seeing someone's memory.
Yeah, it's neat. I'm assuming it's just a lot of like filters and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But the you're just catching flashes, but also I find it amusing that the victim's name and the murderer's name, they're just known right away. Like they have to like
Wow.
carefully pick through
You're
the
right.
scene, like to find where it's gonna happen and everything. But like the actual murderer, like they're the ones, like their name just gets like dropped. Like they have these balls, these wooden balls.
That's the funniest part of this movie to me.
Yeah.
That whole system. I'm like, okay.
Futurama
They explain it.
makes fun of
They do have.
the-
Oh, do they?
Yeah, there's a great episode where Fry becomes a cop, and it's basically like Minority Report, where there's like some sort of half robot, half biological like thing that like sits in a pool and like, you know, senses crimes in the future. But instead of having like the balls get carved with the suspect's name in them and like dropping down like, oh, this is the suspect, it's like balls like plunk and like float up to the surface of the pool, and they like have to pick it out with a net. It's
Wow.
I love how
Yeah.
they're explaining to him like, oh, like this is our advanced crime, you know, precognition unit, like we call him Pickles. And Fry's like, oh, on account of how it looks like he's floating in a jar, and they're like, exactly.
Oh man, that has some Futurama has some great moments.
It is, yeah.
But in the movie, so I guess the precognitives, just because they have future abilities, because we found out later they were like orphans that were on drugs. They're trying to be treated. It's actually, there's lots of explanation in this movie, which I appreciated. Like there were kind of weird things that were happening, and there would be an explanation for it, even though the explanation would be a little weird.
Yeah, and the explanation, they like, it wouldn't necessarily go into super like detail, but it's just like, it's not like they were trying to like explain scientifically like, well, the drug interacts with the whatever, and that's what causes.
Yeah.
Like, no, this weird drug, and like
Yeah.
the junkies who were pregnant while they were on this drug, like their children have this weird gift. It's like, cool, done.
Yeah.
Like, not going to explain it
Well,
anymore. That's
it was like I wasn't sure if the drug that the mother was on gave them the gift, or if the treatment the children got after they were born to make sure they lived gave them the gift.
Yeah.
But the point was it was related to this new drug called Narrowin, I think, which oddly sounds like cocaine. I mean, I'll think of the drug name later. No, it's called Narrowin.
It's Steven Spielberg like hanging out with George Lucas, and they're like, what are we gonna call this new drug? And they're like, well, what's a real drug? Heroin. What if we just say Narrowin? Like,
well, honestly, how our society is developing, like, if there was another drug that was like as addictive as like heroin, like a brand new drug in the market, someone might coin the term Narrowin. Like, I feel like that's actually kind of believable. Like, someone could like hashtag Narrowin and then it becomes its name. I don't know.
Sure. And then Tom Cruise is also a drug addict in this movie. He takes a drug called Clarity, which I feel like it's never fully like explained what it does, but like it does seem to get him high. It seems to almost like affect his memory a little bit.
Yeah.
But he seems to enjoy taking it, so I don't know.
Yeah. Which takes us to, I guess we can move on to the development of, what's even his name? Tom Cruise. Anderton is his last name, right?
Yeah,
is it John?
Anderton. I think it's John.
Yeah. So like, what did you think of his like development and his like motivation?
I think it's perfectly good for what it is, which is like, okay, John Anderton's a cop. He stops future crime, and he's like he's pretty bought into the system. But then like we find out like why is he like such a firm believer in this, and it's because his son was like abducted and presumably killed before the system came online. And so I think that's why he's dedicated to this idea, because he's like, I need to stop things like that from happening. So I mean, it works. Like, it's like a quick and easy way to just be like, why is this guy so into this? And it's like, well, because he had this tragic event happen in his life, and he looks at this as like, this can solve that from ever happening. So I'm fine with the way they did it.
Yeah, he's a pretty well-rounded character. He actually has a nice arc too. Because by the end of the movie, he gets to make a decision of his own free will, and the movie wrestles with you can know things that happen in the future, but if you know the future, it means you can choose something different.
Yeah, I like their little discussion where one of the things that's happening in the movie is that this experiment in pre-crime has only been happening like in the DC area. And like there's this thing about like whether they should take it nationwide, and like all of America will be able to be like seen by the precogs somehow, and they'll be able to stop crime before it ever happens just all across the country.
Right, because it's only in DC that pre-crime. It's like an individual. It's not even the police. It's just like a company that's using the 3 individuals to stop crime, and they're trying to make it go nationwide. And there's a whole political debacle behind that.
Yeah. And the Department of Justice sends like a dude down to kind of like see the program before this big decision is going to happen, and he's like sort of arguing with Tom Cruise a little bit. We find out he actually really likes the program too, but he's like, I guess, playing devil's advocate a little bit or something. And so he's basically like, hey, these guys we have arrested, which that's like the funniest part of the movie to me, or I guess it just shows like the authoritarianness of like this future U.S. government is like, when they arrest these people, they're not just like in jail, they like go to some weird holding facility where it seems like they're all in stasis.
Yes.
Like,
and they talk about them like they're dead, but I didn't realize this to the end of the movie. Like, none of them have actually died.
Yeah. They're all just like in this weird holding facility, and it's very strange because it's like, what are they, you know what I mean? Like, what are they sentenced to? Like, how does this work? Yeah. Like, do they get out after a certain amount of time? Like, what are they experiencing in here?
What if like an EMP attack happens, or like
they all just
the power? Yeah. They all just die, or they all go back. I mean, I guess if there's an EMP attack, all the prisoners.
The crazy guy who's like the warden of them, like who plays the piano, is like he like accidentally hits the wrong switch when he's turning the lights off, and just everyone dies. But
oh my gosh,
just 1,000 people.
What else was he from? I'm trying to think. Was he from an Indiana Jones movie?
He's
that
in
actor?
A lot of stuff. I can't remember everything right now, but Um, oh, the what was I saying? So okay, so yeah, I like the demonstration though, where the FBI guy's like, hey, like these guys have committed no crimes though. Like this is all in advance. It's like, oh, like Tom Cruise is like, but they were gonna commit the crimes, and it's like, yeah, but they haven't yet. And he's kind of like, well, what's the difference? And he like rolls the ball across the desk thing to him, and the FBI really guy catches it, and he's like, why did you catch that? He's like, well, because it would have fallen. Like, how do you know that? Like, it's the same thing of like knowing something is going to happen, you know, versus like, did it actually happen? You know what I mean? Like, yeah, the FBI guy acted to change a known outcome. That's sort of how Tom Cruise views his work. Mm-hmm. So that's apparently how he's, you know, settled with this idea. Yeah, so I mean, I like little things like that in this movie. There's like the little demonstration.
I just had this thought right now, real quick. A very less expensive way you could prevent that crime is just by telling the people.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And then that way the person being killed would be like, you know, not in the place he or she is supposed to be killed. I guess the guy would still be out there, so maybe that's an issue.
Yeah, or like why it is funny. Like that's the punishment part of this is one of the funniest parts. Is like why don't they just go and like, all right, we need to take this person and go to counseling or whatever. Especially the crimes of passion one. Like crimes of passion in real life are complicated because again they're crimes of passion. So a lot of times they're things like if the person had an extra hour or two to think about it, they actually might not have done it. But it's just like they have this strong passion. They were in the right place at the right time, and so it happens. It's kind of like the first attempted murder we see in the movie where the guy catches his wife like cheating, and he's about to kill both her and the guy that she's cheating with. And it's like, well, okay, like, yeah, he's got obviously like emotions are high, but if he had another few hours to process that, like instead of just being confronted with it right there, he might like obviously like he'd be very upset, but like he'd probably just like, all right, I need to talk to a lawyer or something, you know, like he probably wouldn't kill them necessarily. So
like right away from when the movie started off, like the concepts that this movie deals with is actually they're pretty deep, and they do it in a pretty creative. The movie does it in a pretty creative way, or I should say Spielberg does. But from like the first scene that we see, it really kind of like it feels like the whole movie is really going to be wrestling with this idea of like who really is the bad guy. The movie ultimately doesn't really go in that direction, like wrestling with it, but because like the guy, you relate to the guy who's about to commit the crime because like, you know, his wife is like cheating on him with like minutes after he leaves the house for work. And so you kind of like, you know, well, who is right and who is wrong, and you know, how do you deal that out? It's just interesting because the movie really does kind of take these things on. And then by the end of the movie, you see Tom Cruise, John Anderton, realizes the importance of giving someone a choice for the crime they're about to commit. So that's kind of like a nice rounded way to the movie kind of ends. I mean, it doesn't end with that, but by the end of the movie, you see the importance of choice in it, which is kind of cool.
He changes his mind. He kind of goes from being like a determinist to being like, you know what, people can change. You just have to give them the opportunity to. That's like probably the best scene in this movie for me is the scene in which Tom Cruise confronts the man who is set up to look like the murderer of Tom Cruise's son. To me, that's the best scene in the movie because so basically what happens is Tom Cruise, he gets accused of future murder. Even, you know, he's working in the department and all of a sudden like the balls drop and it shows his name and like the guy he's supposed to kill's name, and then like there's the visions and, you know, it's Tom Cruise shooting this guy in an apartment. And so Tom Cruise runs away because he's like, I'm being framed, I'm being set up, I don't even know this man, how would I kill him? And through a series of events, I love that like Tom Cruise is like trying to find this guy to prove his innocence, where I feel like if he was really trying to prove his innocence or like just trying to maybe like undermine something, like I don't know, just get away, like I feel like he would just run as far as you can, like away from this, like go hide, like go get a boat and sail out in the middle of the ocean or something and be like, see, it was wrong. Um, but so Tom Cruise he makes a run for it, but he's trying to find this man that he's supposed to kill because he wants to like figure out how he's being set up to like, you know, how is this trick accomplished that like I wouldn't actually murder this man. And so he eventually, through a series of events, ends up actually finding him. He abducts one of the precogs along the way, gets to the apartment, and he's in the apartment before the actual guy is, and he sees like on the bed just like dozens and dozens or like hundreds of like photos of like children, including some of his son. And it's like, oh, like this is why, you know, Tom Cruise would kill this man without ever
that one coming.
met him before. Yeah. And it's like it's a great scene. It does have the most unnecessary line of dialogue in the film, which is when Tom Cruise is like, you know, ever since he died, I've thought about like what I would do to the man that killed him. And it's like, you don't have to say that out loud. We all know, like, Tom Cruise didn't need to have that line of dialogue. It's really funny because like I feel like the movie's done a good job of showing us up to this point that Tom Cruise is not over the death of his son through the drugs, through him like watching the memories and stuff like that. But for some reason, then it feels the need to like drive it in more with having Tom Cruise give this like weirdly out of place line while he's in this apartment. But then anyway, so the man walks in and Tom Cruise is, you know, he's gonna shoot him, and Agatha, the precog, is like, no, like don't do it, like don't do it, you don't have to do this. And he's like, no, like I know this is what I do because like it's already been seen. And then he's pointing his gun at him. It's like exactly the same way it looks in the precog, but they also know the exact time it's supposed to happen somehow.
That was the one thing that was off.
Yeah, so his watch was like set for like when the crime was supposed to happen because he set it back in the police station, and the timer goes off and he still hasn't shot the other guy yet. And that's when it's kind of like, okay, like, well, that's when you know, Tom Cruise can change and people can change. They don't have to follow the exact chain of events that they've seen.
Yeah.
And I guess like the peak of the movie for me is right then, because then Tom Cruise is like, tearfully, he's like basically sobbing because he desperately wants to kill this man. And like, if he had killed this man in that moment, like believing him to be his son's murderer, believing him to have done horrible, horrible things, like it would have been like totally like
would have been over.
Yeah, and it would have been like you couldn't fault him for doing it almost. Like, yeah, it would have been technically illegal because he's not an active threat to him at that exact moment. But like, yeah, like who wouldn't want to kill like this pedophile murderer basically? Like, this guy's a bad person. Like, he's a very bad person. And it makes sense that Tom Cruise wants to kill him. And so he doesn't, though, and instead he like tearfully starts to read him his rights. And that to me is the best moment in the whole movie, is the like, you have the right to remain silent, and you have anything you say can be held against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. And he's like crying as he's saying this to the guy. And to me, that's the most powerful moment in the movie, is like, because that's when he's choosing to do, like, he's choosing to uphold his duty and choosing to be like the better person in like the worst imaginable situation. And for me, that's like the peak of Tom Cruise's character, of just choosing to be good. And that's why I love that moment so much.
That's really a heroic moment, because we all need to see, we need movies and stories that show us characters like that.
Yeah. But then of course it's immediately revealed this guy, and I love that he just immediately like spills the beans to this guy. Like, that's the other part that's maybe a little unrealistic, but then he's like, oh,
well, I think it's still unexpected.
That's true.
So unexpected.
That's true.
That just in shock. You're like, what?
Yeah, it's revealed this guy isn't actually Tom Cruise's son's murderer. He's just been paid to like be set up like this, because he's supposed to get killed by Tom Cruise, and then his family's gonna get the money. Like, if
he was just some Joe Schmo criminal that someone
Yes.
came and offered him money, just said, "Hey, if you let yourself be killed by this guy, all this money goes to your family."
Yeah. So, like, it's realized this was a setup, and then he kind of grabs at Tom Cruise's gun, and Tom Cruise, like, I don't even know if it's Tom Cruise, but like, basically the gunshot's accidentally fired, like, after they have their little exchange, and he falls out the window, kind of in almost the exact same way that it looks like from the precog vision.
Yep. And
Um,
he even says goodbye. Whatever his name was, something Crow. Was it John? No, was it? I forget what his first name was. But he
Leo
says like,
Crow or something.
Yeah, Leo Crow. He's like goodbye, goodbye Crow or whatever, which is exactly what we saw in the precog vision.
Yep.
And that's another really cool thing about this movie. It's like if anyone has seen Vantage Point, well, I don't know if it's like Vantage Point, but there's lots of like lots of things up front, but you don't understand how they all connect, and you don't see how they all connect until you're right up there in the moment of the movie, and you see the shots and the scenes coming together exactly like you saw in like you could call it prophecy, whatever, from the precog. And one of the scenes was he says goodbye Crow, and then he shoots him and he falls out the window. But in the moment, Tom Cruise was saying goodbye Crow, like I'm not going to shoot you, like I'm walking away, like I'm just done with this, goodbye. And then the guy grabs the gun out of his hand, and like in that scuffle ends up shooting himself, or someone shoots the criminal guy and he falls through the window. And then of course Tom Cruise is framed. So
Yes.
yeah.
Um,
Um, what I really liked this movie because just real quickly, because
I've just
like you
talked for
thought
like I just talked for like 20 minutes, so you're welcome to take as long
okay.
as you want.
No, um I love movies that have at least like two climaxes, or like a false climax and then another one. I just love that so much. The aha moment where something's about to happen. You can't see anything beyond this one moment, and then you get to that moment, and then you find out there's like a lot more behind it. You're like, whoa! It's that, I don't know. It's such a surprise and a fresh, it's just kind of a refreshing thing to see in any kind of story. Like there's depth to it, and so that really felt like it was the climax of the whole movie. And it was at that point in the movie. I think I don't, how long was this movie? I feel like it was
This is like a
longer.
2.5 hour movie.
Yeah. So by the time that moment happens, if you can't stop the movie, pause the movie and see the little cursor and see how far you are through the film, I mean, that really feels like the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Um, and all of a sudden, the bomb is dropped, and it's like, I'm just an actor, and someone hired me, and there's still more to it. And you're like, what? I just love the movies that have that second. And then there's like you could argue another climax after it. It's definitely not as powerful as that first climax where he decides not to shoot him.
And they do plant the like seeds of that beforehand because Agatha, the one precog, is basically that's revealed the concept of a minority report, which is that
Okay, yeah. This is why the movie is called this.
Yep. Normally the precogs all see the same thing, but every once in a while one of them sees something different, and like the murder happens in a different way or whatever the case may be. But as a result of this, like it adds some level of fallibility to the system that like the operator of the systems maybe don't want to admit to, and so this is always like covered up whenever it happens. It's just like whatever the report was that the other two saw, like that's the one that they go with, but the
Yeah.
minority report's always just deleted. Like they don't want people
Right.
to realize that there could actually be a difference. Like they want people to believe that like no, fate is sealed, and like we can go and arrest these people and there's no chance that they would have done something differently. Like they are guilty. That's essentially
Right.
what the problem with having like that minority report is.
And the minority report was a very like subtle thing because they would go to arrest the people with the two, like let's say two of the cognitives saw this one reality and the other one didn't. Well, they go to that reality that the two saw, and like it was as the Emperor Palpatine would be very proud. It was as they had foreseen it. Um, but the minority report is like there is a slightly alternative twist, or there's something to it that makes it possibly different. So like there could be a chance this person would not be guilty, or this might actually be a different murder that looks exactly like it. But yeah, all that minority report is written off, and they call it like some of the cases they call it like an echo. They said where they're just like, oh, that's just like deja vu for
Yeah,
the
they're just
cognitive.
seeing the same murder twice. It's fine.
Yeah, and that's the flaw in the system that potentially has cost, um, not all the lives of the people that were arrested, but like a lot of them,
Yeah.
or at least some of them, at least some, because majority of the time they are stopping real crimes.
Yes, it makes it more possible that like some of those crimes that they were arresting people for might not have happened. Um, there's a good chance that they would have happened, but like maybe the actual timeline could have unraveled differently. So
Yeah, and that just speaks to how this movie is so like nuanced. Like there really is a lot of different pieces that come together. Um, a lot of mystery that builds up, and there's lots of like moments that aren't absolutely necessary but just help the movie. I feel like right before John Anderton, Tom Cruise, um, realizes he's trying to solve the. They have another like vision coming in, so he's like right there to see it. Right, he sees he's the murderer, and he gets his little red ball that says he's a. Was it a red ball or was it just a regular one? Was it a crime of passion?
no, it's not a red ball because the red balls I think are yeah. I thought
Well, that's
that
interesting
he's like
because
a
it was
Yeah,
a
that's what's
crime of
funny is it is
passion.
crime of passion. So that's actually maybe like a little bit of a flaw in the logic of the movie because Tom
Right,
Cruise wouldn't have known he was gonna murder him until
right.
just minutes before. But in the for some reason it comes up as if it's a premeditated crime.
Yeah. So premeditated crimes can be stopped like days in advance. The precognitives they can see that up to like 4 days in advance if it's like a really planned out thing. Um, but if it's a crime of passion where you decide to kill someone in like an instant, then they only get that within like the 24 hours,
Yeah,
which is
or like
still
the one that
or like
happens in the
15
beginning of
minutes
the
or
movie
something.
is I think like they have like about an hour from the time
Yeah.
that they get it to the time that they're actually gonna have to stop the murder. Which
Yeah.
again, Futurama makes fun of when they're like, "Oh, there's a murder. It's gonna happen," and like at like this time, it's like, "Oh, darn, we can only chill out for like an hour and a half before we have to go out and stop them."
Spoken like a true employee, wanting their break time. But well, I don't remember what I was saying.
The crime of passion. I don't know,
Yeah,
but
the kind of passion. Um, so he gets his ball, and then yeah, the little moments that the movie didn't really need, but I feel like added to it. Um, so he realizes that he's the murderer, and he's like just in shock. Like I would never kill someone. Why is this happening? And then so he kind of shuts off, like he closes the door. Apparently there's like a panel online that observes the directors as they like the detective as he like figures out who did the crime, so that way there's like accountability. So he turns all the screens off so no one's watching him, so no one can see that it's him, which is already kind of suspicious. But and then once he figures out that it's him, and he's kind of had his the music climaxes, and he has his little like moment. He looks down, he sees that because the detective room is connected to where the cognitives are. Um, and there's a guy in the room with the cognitives, like in a pool, all connected to these wires, right? And he like takes care of them. This guy down there, and so he's watching through the glass what Tom Cruise is seeing. And so he sees Tom Cruise, and they have this moment where they both realize that they both know, and they just kind of look at each other, and he goes, like, "I really like you, John, so I'm gonna give you 2 minutes before I sound the alarm," because like they were both shocked that he would kill someone. Like they didn't in the movie didn't really need to do that. He
and then
could have just
I love
busted
the
out of
scene.
there.
I also love the scene immediately after that where in
That's
the
my favorite
elevator
scene.
where I
Yep.
think John
Yep.
thinks he's already been had by the FBI guy. The FBI guy's got him for something else. He's got him for the drug use, and he's like, you're
Yeah.
going down." And John's like, "Oh, I think he thinks it's like a much more serious,
Yes.
he's gonna arrest me for the future murder or whatever." And so John actually like pulls his gun out of his holster and like holds it underneath the FBI guy's chin. And I love the FBI guy's actually like totally calm. And he's
Yes.
like, "I don't hear a red ball, John. Like, we both know you're bluffing." But
Yeah.
then like the alarm goes off and all of a sudden he's like, "Oh no."
His face just yes. They're in the elevator. He's like, "Yeah, what are you gonna do? Shoot me? I don't hear a red ball dropping." And then the alarm goes off, and like no one says anything, but they just both he just kind of figures out instantly that he is gonna
Maybe
kill
there
someone,
was.
and
Yeah.
maybe I'm the guy, and his
Yeah.
face just totally changes to like, "Oh shoot." That's a great moment.
Yeah.
Which I also noticed that character, like, so like half an hour into the movie, there wasn't really an obvious villain, but I was very interested in the movie. I was very intrigued, and that was a huge plus for me. And you kind of think it's that FBI agent guy at first, because he's a typical, very annoying hotshot agent that wants to take over. Like every agent movie, I feel like has that character in it. The guy that comes in doesn't really know what he's doing, but is trying to take over.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's kind of like the bad guy for most of the movie. But at
He's
the
set
same
up
time,
to be the opposition.
yeah, he's the opposition because like he's trying to do a good thing. Like he's trying to. He thinks the truth is that John Anderton is going to kill Leo Crow. You know, Tom Cruise is going to kill someone. But that's not really. But that's not the case. And so you kind of he's not really like a super bad guy, but he's definitely annoying.
And it
So
makes
he
it
kinda
seem like
serves-
he wants the program for himself. So
yeah, yeah,
he wants
And
to
yeah,
steal.
he does.
He
He
wants to
does.
steal Tom Cruise's job.
And
So
there was one moment that I thought was hilarious. There's a scene where so Tom Cruise is on the run, believe it or not, Tom Cruise running, and the FBI hotshot guy is following him, and they fall into like a car factory. And I kid you not, like it was just so weird to me because John Williams did the music to this movie, and it was just like hearing John Williams score a scene where two people are fighting on like a conveyor belt in a factory just like screams Star Wars to me.
well, and it's funny because it comes out. This movie came out the same year as Attack of the
Did it?
Clones. Yeah.
Did it really?
Yeah. So I do find that really funny that like
Wow. Well, then I applaud John Williams because he managed to create two different scores, like almost filming the exact same scene, but like they definitely sound different, but like thematically, you know. But at the same time, it's just like, okay, Spielberg and George Lucas, I guess they were working together or something
it would
because
have been funny.
it's
It's
literally
like
like
it's
they're
like the
fighting.
same. It's the same set. Like they go into the room and it's just
Yes.
Geonosis. There's
Yes,
like a bug.
the
flying.
Droid Factory and Attack of Clones with Anakin and Padme.
They have like
and then
police
this scene.
droids. It's just battle droids, but with like blue
Yeah.
and red lights
Yeah.
on their head.
Yeah, and there's literally like giant robots like stamping on top of them in this fight sequence. Like, and Tom Cruise gets stuck in a vehicle and the other guy escapes. Man, Tom Cruise can really hold his own, I gotta say. But as soon as he gets like trapped in a car.
I
in
do
the car
love that. Yeah, the
factory.
car gets like assembled around him, and then he uses
Yes.
the car to escape.
Yes,
And just drives away.
The bad guy or the FBI people think they got him because like okay he's trapped in this car, it's just built, and it's coming off the line, and then it gets spray painted sports car red. I'm like, oh, he's
It's
totally
on.
not gonna drive that car off. That's exactly what he does. He just plops off the line and vroom, takes
Drives
off.
away.
So I guess those things can drive on their own.
I also like the Sonic shotgun thingy in the movie.
that was really cool. I wish they used that more, honestly.
Yeah, and I like how it's set up where we see a bad guy use it, so we like know how it works. Then Tom Cruise picks it up, and then he uses it to kind of get out of a situation.
He whips that thing around, man. He's no joke.
Yeah, I love the reload on it. How it's like you spin it. Like I don't know
Yeah.
what the logic is, what's really happening there, but like it's cool.
Yeah,
So-
it's cool. And he takes on like 8 police officers with jetpacks, and he doesn't even have one.
Yeah, I love how
Um,
he is just like he's the ultimate action hero, man.
But he does it kind of believably.
Yeah,
Like
he just knows how everyone operates because he's like the chief of police. Like he knows
Yeah.
how all these guys do their job. Like
yeah, and then no one really wants to hurt each other because they all know it because they feel like they have to turn in their boss, the guy's hunting him down, and so they're kind of like trying not to be like unnecessarily brutal. You know what I mean? Like they're like, come on, John, like just surrender or whatever. And so they're kind of maybe pulling their punches a little bit, which kind of helps him get away, but still, yeah.
yeah, but yeah. Overall, what's interesting is I guess like if we're gonna get into like closing thoughts here,
Yeah.
and we've managed to not actually spoil the ending of the movie, which I kind of appreciate.
Right.
We've discussed a lot of the cool points on it about the movie, but yeah, I mean, we might as well almost at this point just leave the ending intact for anyone who does want to watch it. Maybe if you haven't,
They
seen
all
it before.
die.
Yeah, a nuke goes off and everyone dies.
China attacks.
the precogs is like the vision is just a fireball. I'm confused.
That needs to be an ending. Oh my gosh. It's like any movie about anything, and then it ends with like China invading, and then everyone dies.
They combine.
Okay.
They also build a time machine, and then they combine the precog's mental ability with the time machine to create Edge of Tomorrow, so
Oh
they
my
can
gosh.
predict the future and then reset the day to
Edge of Tomorrow War
yeah.
with Velociraptors.
But so what's interesting, this movie is released in like on June 17th, 2002. And it's really weird how well it's tied in with current events at the time. So it's weird because the movie wraps in July of 2001. And then in September of 2001, as we all know, 9/11 happens.
Wow.
Tragic event, obviously. Enough said there, because that's not really, I mean, that's not really like the thing we're talking about. But in the aftermath of 9/11, by October, the Patriot Act is passed, and the Patriot Act
Oh, yeah.
lets the government spy on everyone in the country to hopefully stop future terrorist attacks before they happen. So it's
Dang.
weird how this movie, like, I don't know how much they could have tweaked in editing, like if the movie's trying to maybe show that if it's just coincidence that that's like the sort of the theme of the movie, that like, hey, maybe like trying to predict everyone's actions before they happen on spying on everyone all the time isn't the greatest, and having like a security state where we can just like send little
Right.
spider drones into people's
Yeah,
apartments.
those are intense.
Yeah. Like, I love how casually it's shown too, that like they send all these little spider drones into the apartment to like scan for people when they're looking for
Yeah.
John. And like
Yeah.
they just like, there's no warrants. They just like drop them into the apartment. They like scoot underneath of doors, and they like jump up on people and like give them retina scans. Like,
Yeah.
and like people are like, the kids are freaked out, but then there's like adults. There's like, then apparently this is like not an uncommon thing, because like there's two adults that are like fighting. They're having like an argument,
Yeah.
and like the spiders jump up on them, and they just like stop. They're like pause, and they're like, good, like clear, like not the guy we're looking for. And they jump away, and they just immediately go right back to their argument. Like, it's not even like, it's so casual. You know what I mean? There's like, oh, we just gotta take a pause for a minute because we gotta get the spider
Right.
drone eye scan. They're not like freaking out, like, what the heck? Some government drones just broke into our apartment and scanned our IDs. It's like, no, this is just a thing that happens. Like,
Yeah. And like the one of the ads that's playing in the movie says it's like, no, vote for pre-crime whatever to ensure that which keeps us safe will also keep us free. And
yes,
it's like the whole that dichotomy of like safety and freedom, like you can't perfectly have both at the same time.
yeah,
So I was like, but they're insisting that like their freedom is safe, which is again kind of eerily like the Patriot Act. Like, if you want to be safe, to protect our freedom, we're gonna take away freedom. So,
we're gonna all have freedom as long as, you know, the government just gets to like know everything that's happening all the time.
right.
So, yeah, it's just
Um,
it's interesting how coincidentally this movie was being made before that happened. I mean, obviously, like the idea of like an Orwellian society existed before then, because, you know, the idea has been around a long time. But like, it's just funny how coincidental the release and production of this movie happened to be with real events in U.S. like Department of Justice happenings that, you know, corresponded with it. So.
Yeah. So it is. I don't know. Maybe that just contributes to the, in some weird way, to the quality of the movie.
Mhm.
I don't know. It seems like it was out of the director's hands that this happened, but still.
Or was it? New
Oh,
new
was it?
9/11 conspiracy theory.
Spielberg knew this was gonna happen.
Everyone's saying that Bush did 9/11, but what if Steven Spielberg did 9/11?
Well, honestly, technically, if you'd, they talked about this in that documentary. What was it called? Turning Point, where the FBI was aware of the. This is completely tangent, but like they were aware of the terrorists in the country,
Yes.
that they're planning to do something with the planes.
Well, I think it was the CIA knew something about
Oh yeah, but they didn't
Al-Qaeda,
communicate.
yeah, wanted to do something with planes, and then the FBI knew about these guys like in the country. or something like that, but like no one was talking to each other.
Yeah.
So
So
yeah,
and then Spielberg found out.
yeah, and then he started
Decided
making
to
this movie
capitalize on it.
in advance instead of reporting it to the authorities. Yeah, that's definitely what happened. So I think Tom Clancy wrote something about terrorists using planes pre 9/11 too. I can't remember. And then yeah, anyway, sorry, that's like a whole separate discussion. But yeah, 9/11's anniversary just happened shortly before us recording this, so I think that might be why it's a little bit on the mind, the 20th anniversary. But
Yeah.
yeah, but anyway, Minority Report, good movie, interesting comments about sort of a police state and determinism versus free will, and just it's a well-made film. There's a lot of nice
Yeah.
stuff in it.
There
So
is. Thumbs up.
thumbs up.